Do you believe that some roads hide secrets that challenge reason? Today, you will dive into stories that will make any night trip seem like a true test of courage. Get ready to feel goosebumps with every curve of this journey. I had just loaded a lot in the capital of Pernambuco with final delivery expected in Maceió when the person responsible for the shed, a high-appearance looking boy, he explained that these were mannequins intended for a store about to be inaugurated in the central region of the capital. Normally it would be something unusual, because in my long experience behind the wheel, I had already taken everything, from electronic equipment to old parts, and even some volumes that was better, don't even ask the content. I checked the delivery ratio and cataloged each dummy while they were embarking on the vehicle. I counted 25 items, all packed in cardboard crates with bubble plastic and wrapped in tape. Each cashier carefully tagged, indicating whether it contained single parts or mannequins complete. As soon as they completed the tidy, I launched a final look at ensure that the mooring was impeccable. I learned in other trips that a poorly sealed compartment generates damaged items, something I avoided at any cost. Also, with the forecast of heavy rain that there has been announced, it was essential to protect everything so as not to wet. As soon as I finished closing, I climbed the truck ride and triggered the engine, feeling the known vibration of the diesel awakening the machine. I departed en route in the late afternoon, noticing the urban lights that were slowly lit, while dusk space for darkness. I was eager to get rid of those mannequins, because there was something in them that always caused me a slight discomfort, perhaps the way they appeared to observe the environment with those hollow eyes, or how clarity sometimes created shadows bizarre in their neutral kaunos. Anyway, I wanted to get rid of that order as soon as possible. With the address configured in the browser and an extensive dawn ahead, I tuned the radio at an Foro station, settled in the bench, and continued, aiming at the highway that serpented the night landscape towards Alagoas. The route by BR 430 followed quiet, with scarce movement and one night clear above. The asphalt was cut only by the headlights of my gross, which they extended like a dark river in front of me. I had planned only one short break for coffee and to lengthen a little, but as usual, life reserved surprises. It was already close to midnight when the first rain splashes they plummeted, announcing an intense storm. So I increased the speed of the wiper and reduced that of the vehicle, keeping a safe gap of the rare cars that shared the way with me. The Foro song that played in the radio now merged with traffic communications and warnings meteorological. It was at this moment that I noticed for the first time a soft, almost suffocated noise, remembering something lightly playing on the inside of the chest. At first, attributes to the tubing of the water in the brass, or possibly some poorly stuck accessory that I had not tied properly. But as the rain loved, that sound it continued clear, as if they were intentional beats. Maybe it's some loose object, I muttered to myself, trying not to feed the strangeness. I decided that I would stop at the next post to check everything. I couldn't risk spoiling the pieces or leaving something detach entirely. When I finally parked, the clock was already pointing close to 1 a.m. The post was almost deserted, bathed by lamps fluorescent, giving a spectral air to the environment. I turned off the engine and grabbed my flashlight, hearing the noise of the boots on the soaked floor resonating in the night silence. I opened the chest with some hesitation, and the beam of flashlight tore the darkness, illuminating the volumes that contained the mannequins, apparently same state I left them. For a moment, I thought it was just paranoia. It was there that the noise returned, clearer, coming from the bottom of the compartment. My heart fired as I moved between those volumes, the flashlight swinging a little in my hand, until, when I arrived in the background, I stopped abruptly. It was not the packages that generated the noise, but something or someone beating inside one of them. My initial reaction was to get away. The heart seemed to go out of the mouth, and my mind struggled to understand what was occurring. That box in front of me moved, hitting the sides of cardboard with an intensity that echoed in the chest, swallowed in dry, tightening the flashlight to sweep each shadow to my front. I arrived softly to the box that emanated that noise. She was both away from the others, hidden behind some larger volumes. The label it had turned down, preventing the identification of the content. With the trembling breath, I dragged the box to where there was the most light and, with my pocket knife, broke the ribbons that held it. The sound ceased the moment I touched the lid. An oppressive mutism took over the compartment, so intense that I could almost feel it. Carefully, I lifted the lid and I peered inside, waiting to see some trapped animals. Who knows? But there was no sign of none of that. Instead, I came across one of the mannequins, but he didn't seem like the others I was taking. This was peculiar. His synthetic eyes seemed wide, very open indeed, with a countenance that remembered dread, almost human, as if he wanted to escape the way he was accommodated. I walked away one little, with the breath stuck. It made no sense. Mannequins do not change expressions, do not even have emotions. However, the flashlight's beam showed me clearly horror carved in that face. Not wanting to spend another minute there, I closed the lid quickly and returned the box to its corner. My body entirely trembled as I locked the compartment and turned the lock with more vigor than common. I went back to the cabin, trying to ward off the daydreams of what I had witnessed. I started the engine and left the post so hurry. I needed any distance between me and that load, at least until I reached Maceo and get rid of what it had happened. But as I continued through the deserted and lighting road, the sound of the beats he returned stronger, harder. It seemed that what I saw, I tried to give me some warning, or perhaps run away from within. To the punches proceeded, increasingly intense, reverberating the interior of the compartment and reaching the cabin, where I concentrated on the track ahead. With each blow, a calafrio roamed my back, a permanent reminder of that disturbing load that I drove. Even dominated by fear, I decided that I would not open the chest again. Whatever it was, I didn't want to face again those terrifying eyes. The dawn ran, and with her, my affliction increased. The highway looked infinite, each kilometer stretching more than the previous one. Tiredness dominated me, but the fear of parking and facing again the container kept me awake. In every post I saw, I thought to stop and ask for help. But what would I claim? What my order had life? The dolls tried communicate? No one would take it seriously. I would make myself a joke, or worse, they could, I think, delirious by exhaustion. So I followed, squeezing the steering wheel until the hands hurt, the fixed look on the track that opened under the lighting of the headlights. The sound of radio had long been off, changed with the uninterrupted touch of the beats. Finally, the aurora's first clarities began to dye the firmament with a faint blue. Maceo approached, bringing the perspective of freeing me from that referral dark. When I entered the urban area, the movement intensified, remembering of the common routine and returning me some serenity, troubled. I reached the warehouse early in the morning. The employee who appeared to welcome the delivery, it was amazed with my clearly worn look. Without wait for help, I opened the hasty compartment and without returning my face, started the unloading of the boxes. He tried to ask me some things, perhaps intrigued by my urgency and deducted features, but I ignored him, focused on clearing myself from those dolls as soon as possible. When removing the last box, I felt a huge relief on the shoulders. I warned the boy that everyone the volumes were delivered, signed the paperwork, and returned to truck without explanations. When turning the key, I threw one last look at storage. There were no nods or nostalgia, just the desire to put kilometers between me and those mannequins. Room I to home in automatic mode, still mentally reviewing the events of last night, until I decided that, after that delivery, it was essential highways. Perhaps look for another activity, something far from remittances unusual and noises without explanation in the darkness. It was one of those storms that lead anyone to think 2 times before taking the road. I followed by BR 310, returning from a service inside with the empty ride, having only the sound of the tires on the soaked track like companion. The highway was practically deserted, which did not scare in a night like that. It was midnight when I saw a silhouette signaling the roadside. I reduced the still uncertain march. Was a whole subject shop without any protection right there in the darkness. Contrary to my common sense, I decided to stop and open the door. "Need help?" he asked, and the boy, relieved, just made an affirmative sign with your head up. As soon as it settled in the passenger seat, I closed the door and focused on the highway. He trembled with cold, the teeth shaking non-stop. "You are almost becoming ice, my friend. Want me call the heater?" I suggested, already moving the panel. He only agreed with a nod and annoyed more in the jacket, which was soaked to the point of little warm, the poor thing. "Where did you come from in a flood of these?" I asked, trying to relieve the tense climate. The man looked up with some distraction, as if it took a while to find the words, until he released, "I was at the house of an acquaintance and lost the time. The rain squeezed, and not I was driving more. Thanks for helping, most would have ignored me." The tone of gratitude seemed genuine, but his voice brought a weight, as if each syllable was costly. I chose not to insist on questioning him. The storm grew, striking the windshield, demanding full attention on direction. However, while the wipers operated at most, part of me was curious about what that stranger could narrate while the road disappeared under the flood. The silence in interior of the truck grew. The passenger, who identified himself as Breno, it seemed to be immersed in reflections, staring at the window as if each drop of water evoked remote memories. I kept the focus on the track, but mine curiosity only increased. After several kilometers in almost stunning, Breno began to report. I didn't encourage him. He started his speech. Talked about highways he had known, about trips previous, but they were not mere stories of road. They were narratives that brushed the dingy. He cited drivers who, during nights of rain similar to that, they hung from strangers and ended up having an end that no one previewed. Breno spoke of a driver who rescued a girl on the same route where we rode, and she had disappeared from the vehicle without any sign, leaving only a soaked scarf. Other narrative involved a boy who collected a traveler who claimed to meet shortcuts on a sideway, but the driver never appeared again. Breno's tales generated an environment loaded inside the cabin. Each plot came with such vivid details that seemed to take you to the place of events. While he spoke, the rain, it seemed to answer, sometimes intensifying, sometimes giving in, as if mark each stretch. While I heard, I couldn't avoid feeling intermittent chills. The stories were hypnotic, but existed something in them deeply disturbing, perhaps by the way Breno described them with a serene, almost apathetic tone, or by the face devoid of emotion that accompanied your lines. They didn't sound just as stories to pass the time. They looked like alerts, or possibly confessions. Still, I did not hear or doubt what he described. A part of me preferred not to know anymore, while another was entangled by the narratives. As he continued, the road was looking like staying more and more, and the storm gave no signs of stopping. To the memories of Breno filled the environment, creating an aura that I had not sure if I wanted to break, even if I could. The dawn went on, and every report brought by Breno seemed to inject more darkness inside the cabin. The precipitation was still intense on the windshield, and the repetitive noise of the cleansing became a macabre trail to their stories. While he disagreed, the highway had sounded even more isolated, as if we were leaving the reality backwards, going to a suspended corner in time and reason. When Breno started the history of a carrier who had disappeared after giving a hitchhike to an enigmatic subject, a chill traveled me. He reported that the driver was found days later, with the truck dropped on the shoulder, the engine still in operation, but without trail of it or the hitchhiker unknown. It was then, while my eyes were still fixed on track, which I noticed something changing beside me. I turned my face to question Breno, possibly in an attempt to dissolve the tension that his narratives had instituted, or just to confirm if he gave any sign of mocking me. However, as I diverted my eyes to the next seat, I found him unoccupied. Breno was gone. Where he had sat down, there remained only his soaked robes, organized in a way that almost outlined a human form, as if the body that was in them, he had gone out, leaving only that lifeless outline. For a few seconds I was still, my heart hammering so vigorously that it almost filled the whole vehicle space. I swallowed hard. Trying to find logical in what had just occurred, I considered parking and analyzing the clothes, seeking some indication that offered a plausible explanation, but something in me, almost a whisper of instinct, instructed me to follow, not to spy back, the abandon those clothes and Breno's memory right there. I guided the truck for the rest of the night autopilot, with the mind struggling to distinguish the real from the possible delirium caused by tiredness and that strange company. When, finally, I arrived at my destination, the sun already appeared, throwing clarity in landscape that, after all, would never be the same for me. I dropped the Breno's clothes on a stopping point bench on the road, accompanied by a ticket warning, "Attention to who you offer a ride." Perhaps it would serve as a warning to other travelers, or just as my way of saying goodbye to that human puzzle and the sinister stories that, to this day, resonate in my mind whenever I face highway. I was driving through BR 77, in the middle of Tocantins, in a night without moonlight, where only the beam of my truck ripped the darkness as I advanced to fulfill the next delivery. Suddenly, I came across an obstruction on the track, something that definitely did not exist in the last week I spent there. It was a robust barrier composed of huge trees and boulders, totally blocking the passage. There was no way to proceed without going down to resolve the issue. I jumped from the cabin, grabbed my flashlight, and I started the verification. That place was derived without telephone signal, and the only near civilization was a small village, several kilometers from there. While I evaluated the lock, I captured a noise coming from the forest next to asphalt, similar to branches leaving. As if something or someone moved there, I pointed to the flashlight in that direction, but the dense vegetation prevented me from seeing something clearly. Suddenly, the noise ceased, leaving only the night silence and the sporadic whisper of the wind. I decided that the best attitude it would be to start moving trunks and rocks. With a lot of effort, I managed to take some initial obstacles, mentally thanking the physical preparation acquired in the load and discharge daily. After removing each trunk, I watched the surroundings, taken by a strange impression of being watched. After minutes of intense toil, a fog started to rise, descending quickly and almost zeroing my visibility. The scenario became more terrifying, and I streamlined the rhythm, trying to open passage as soon as possible. It was when driving a bigger trunk that I heard again in the vegetation. This time much closer, I illuminated the focus in that direction and, for a brief second, believed I saw something move between the shrubs. My heart shot, dominated by a hurry that invaded me, for it was time to finish everything and disappear from there. I removed just enough for the truck to pass and ran back to the ride, locking the door as soon as I entered. Throwing a look in the mirror, I noticed that the fasteners already swallowed the previously obstructed stretch. As if hiding something, I triggered the engine and left as soon as possible, still feeling that weight of hidden looks. This impression only dropped me when I returned to the highway, illuminated by the town posts I spotted ahead. I went on, trying to calm me down and pay attention to the route. It was not long before emotional wear accumulated began to make themselves feel, and I needed to find a place to rest urgently. I decided to stop at the next supply post to have coffee and lengthen. However, before reaching any stop, a weak clarity by the road has attracted my attention. It was a road narrow, penetrating the forest, with a wooden plate worn by the time, where you read Village of Harmony. Moved by curiosity and the desire to discover more about the area, perhaps inquiring about that barrier, I decided to take the deviation. Letting out a sigh, I entered the sting, driving the truck by a route that soon turned out to be even tighter and careless of what I had supposed. After a few minutes of slow direction, the vegetation opened to reveal a tiny village, which seemed to have stopped in time with wooden houses and roofs. One more square with a fountain in disuse in the center. No vehicle indication, modern or recent technology. Everything appeared to be incredibly intact, as if it were a piece of frozen history. As soon as I parked the truck, a group of natives approached. They were people of diverse age groups, wearing garments, simple but well watched. An elderly gentleman with white hair and a wide smile. He presented himself as Benedito, the local leadership. He showed a sympathy that I haven't seen for a long time and called me to supper with them, claiming to be risky to continue a trip for there at night. Moved by gratitude for generosity and fascination with singularity of the place, I accepted. We had a simple home dishes, but tasty, as we spoke of life there. They little mentioned the rest of the world, preferring to highlight the beauties and difficulties of an isolated routine. As the night ran, Benedito began to describe how the community was a great place to live, citing that certain travelers had already opted to stay there, finding tranquility and meaning. He stared at me with an emphasis that was starting to disconcert me, as if your sentences involved a call for me to consider stay there. The things started to get uneasy. Hospitality initial now assumed the form of subtle pressure, so that I would become part of the village. By saying that I needed to follow early, I realized a quick change of glances between them. The friendly climate was becoming heavy, and a feeling of being entangled in something I didn't capture right took over me. While prose continued, Benedito's insistence, and from the other places, so that I thought to stay there was clearer. They cited the ills of modernity, the chaos of the great centers, and how there in the village of Harmony I would find a sanctuary against all this. Apparently, several outsiders had already become residents after discovering the peace that the place offered. Notwithstanding their affability, an alarm sounded in my head. Something was not right. The way how some throw me looks, almost evaluators, and the form stubborn to convince me, started to cause me discomfort. I looked for another theme, questioning the barrier on the road, and had information about it. The reaction was instant and very uncertain. Benedito just stuck his head, mentioning that sometimes the trees fell because of the weather, but nothing beyond that. I saw a brief exchange of looks between the staff, as if they had a secret that they wanted to admit. It made me even more schist. While the night advanced, my longing to leave it increased. The initial courtesy had become a firm, albeit discreet, pressure to join that people. By saying that it was necessary to leave and sleep, since I planned to leave the day dawn, Benedito proposed that I occupy one of the vague houses of the place, just to experience life place, he said. I thanked it, but I refused, insisting on staying in truck. He seemed frustrated, but stopped insisting, just accompanied me to the vehicle, wishing good night with a smile that, though kind, had a heavy air that I didn't decipher well. Already in the cabin, I locked everything and lay down. But sleep has not arrived. My mind passed on everything, trying to join the pieces of why so much insistence for me to stay. What would be the riddle behind of that obstruction and the imprisonment of the village? The impression of being under watch persisted, and I passed all time checking the windows of the truck, waiting to catch something or someone there outside. I decided that when Raya the sun, it would leave at once, regardless of them, they tried to say. The village of Harmony, although it appeared to be peaceful to the first sight, I hid something I didn't intend to unravel. At dawn was changing up to date, and I, in the midst of a mixture of fear and resolution, I started to pack everything to get out of the village, even in the face of courtesy and strange invitations of the inhabitants. An inner voice told me that I needed to preserve my freedom, my existence on the roads. I turned on the truck before dawn, trying not to draw attention, to avoid awakening the locals. I peered by the rearview mirror and saw that some silhouettes already emerged between the houses, moving slowly in my direction. I didn't want clashes or debates, just disappear from there. When I arrived close to the exit, found that the trunks were still barred the route. Without hesitation, I went down from the cabin and I started to take the trunks in a hurry. The morning air energized me and the hurry strengthened me. Benedito came up while I worked. "No need to leave," he said in a calm tone, contrasting with the firmness of his words. "Here you would find it quiet, far from the tumult of big cities." I paused, staring at him. "I thank hospitality and for providing me shelter," I said in a polite but firm tone. "But my life, it's out there on the roads. I can't stay here." By noticing my obstinacy, he stepped back and shook his head slowly. "Then follow front, friend. The road calls, and it is up to you to serve it." As soon as the passage opened, I ran back to the truck, connected the engine, and not I looked back. When driving outside the village, I tried a mix of relief and strange melancholy. The route ahead was free, and the flash of the dawn began to bathe everything. I suspected that perhaps it would never go with another place like the village of Harmony, and something in me wondered if I had been right. But as the village disappeared in the mirror, I felt that familiar freedom that only asphalt can bring. That was my house, my Fado, always changing, always ahead. And while the star emerged, marking a new day, I went on, ready to be whatever the road reserved. The village of Harmony had now only become a reminder, a brief interlude on the extensive route of my life.